Bobby. Hey, Chris.
Good evening. Thank you for joining our 9th webinar of our 12-month series, Understanding Dementia Through Observational Tools. Our program will be recorded and can be found on our Anthem YouTube channel in the coming week. Please keep your cameras and microphones off until the Q&A portion, at which time you can either type your questions into the chat or raise your hand and we will unmute you. We are delighted once again to bring to you a legend in dementia training, Dr. Tam Cummings. Dr. Tam, as she is known in the dementia community, is a practicing gerontologist who has devoted her professional career to educating both professionals and family caregivers. In 2009, she founded the Dementia Association with the mission to inspire, educate, and empower dementia caregivers. At Anthem, we utilize her transformative work, including the Itty Bitty Dementia book, in our daily conversations with families of those with dementia. If you have not already received your copy of the Itty Bitty Dementia book, you can find one at your nearest Anthem community. Also, all the links to the tools we'll be going over tonight are in the chat. Families, professionals, and caregivers, it is an honor to again present to you Dr. Tam.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Anthem Memory Care. It is always so exciting to find a group of people that want to educate the families around them, because the better educated we are, the better we are at doing our jobs, the better you are at helping us do our jobs, and we just, in the end, provide better care for your families. Now, I know we don't really have an introduction slide today because we're going to be doing stuff a little bit looser. We're going to be looking at the tools that we use in gerontology in order to grade your loved one for different things that we think could be impacting their care. All of the tools that we're going to use today are observational. All of those tools, as Chris and Nicole have told you, are available online. They're going to put them in the chat, and they're in the back of your Itty Bitty Dementia book. And the Itty Bitty Dementia book is coming to the communities. It's just hung up in production right now. They should have a new set of books in. You can also get the Anthem Memory Care version of the Itty Bitty Dementia book on Amazon if you can't wait. And again, these are the tools that we use. But before we start, because I know that what we do is really, it's so extraordinary that y'all are able to watch the videos and be able to participate and take this information in, because this is very difficult information to hear. And you're learning things about your loved one that our medical community is not set up to teach you yet. And so, again, kudos and applause to Anthem Memory Care for taking the time to put together this series so that you can better understand the brain disease that's happening to your loved one. As we go through the course of dementia, one of our primary goals is not only to do care for your loved one, and that's what the Anthem Memory team is there to do, but it's also to provide care and support for you. And the real reason, when your loved one moves into our communities, the real reason we ask you not to come back for the first several days is because we realize at that point you are so exhausted as a caregiver that it's critical for your own health that you go home and rest and be able to rest without being worried about your loved one. As part of the process of this disease, we want you to understand how to do care for yourself. And one of the easiest and hardest things to do is breath meditation. So when you come to visit your loved one at Anthem, before you ever get out of your car in the parking lot, I want you to practice this breathing technique that we're about to do. When you finish visiting with your loved one, and remember, your visits need to be limited to 20 or 30 minutes, because otherwise you're interfering with the activities of the building, you're interfering with what we're designed to do for your loved one, and that amount of time can become too upsetting for your loved one and for you. When you come to visit, tell our caregiver, I'm going to be here 30 minutes. And when 30 minutes is up, the caregiver is going to come, take your loved one to an activity, and you can part ways with a hug and a kiss and without feeling all that angst and worry. When you come to visit, bring a donut, bring a slice of pie, bring a cookie, bring a brownie, bring something your loved one loves to eat. And we know that's going to be something sweet because of brain damage. When you leave your visit, before you start your car and take off back down the highway because traffic is heavy. And let's be honest, people don't drive like we do. But stop before you get out of the parking lot and do the breathing technique again. So the breathing technique I want you to use is that you are going to breathe in through your nose to the count of 4. You're going to hold that breath for the count of 2, and you're going to breathe out to the count of 6, hold for 2, breathe in to the count of 4, hold for 2, breathe out to the count of 6. The reason that I want you to do this, and we're going to do it 3 times today, Chris, but the reason I want you to do this is if the out breath is longer than the in breath, then automatically your respiration and your pulse begin to slow down. So that when you feel yourself getting really, really anxious or depressed, and depression is coulda, woulda, shoulda, it's thinking in the past, and anxiety is what if, it's thinking into the future. And when we see you come to visit your loved one, we want you to be calm and centered. And this is one of the easiest ways to do it. Now, Chris, if you start doing this breathing technique and you tell me a month from now you're now doing it 10 minutes a day, twice a day, you're now officially meditating, because this type of breath slows your body down to what we call prayer or a meditative state. So with feet flat on the floor, hands up in your lap, it has to do with circulation. You're going to breathe in and out through your nose, and I'm going to count for you. So everybody, feet on the floor, hands in your lap. You can shut your eyes if you want to. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold, hold, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold, hold. Third time, last time, deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, Chris, here's one of the hard things for women about doing this is when you do this breath, we actually want to see your stomach or your abdomen come out. And with women, we've been taught over and over by society, by our families, by our friends to suck it all in, that it can be hard for us to do this natural deep breathing where we fill up to our bottom lungs and our abdomen actually comes out. So don't be worried. Don't be upset about that. That's what is supposed to happen. We want you to take these deep abdominal breaths because breathing like this, Chris, tells your parasympathetic nervous system that it's okay, that you're safe, your loved one is safe, and right now in this moment it's okay. And that's the only thing any of us is actually responsible for. Now, if you've got your book, we're going to start, we're going to be in the final part, which is chapter 5, and we're going to go through those tools. But I need you to understand that very, very slowly over the course of this disease, you have, as a caregiver, become physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. There's a very good chance that your own health is at risk, that you haven't had routine and normal social interactions in quite a while. For some people, it's even been years. There's a very high probability that you have depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, or secondary traumatic stress disorder, on top of your own ailments, your own mortality things that you have going on. And what continues to amaze me, Chris, is family members made sure even during the pandemic their loved one was seen. Even if it was by Zoom, they had them seen by a doctor. But family caregivers themselves may not have been seeing their doctor routinely. And we know that secondary traumatic stress disorder is also called compassion fatigue. And it has finally been admitted that if professionals can develop compassion fatigue working with strangers, how in the world could a family member who loves their loved one not also develop compassion fatigue? So it has now been determined that the families do develop compassion fatigue. The test you will take is in all capital letters. It's called the ProQuil test, and it's available on Google. But instead of resident, every time you see the word resident, you would replace that word with your loved one. And so far, that's the only test we have available, but it measures for you whether you have compassion for your loved one, whether you have burnout, you need a respite care, you need a weekend away, you need to take some time for yourself, or whether you've actually developed compassion fatigue. And one of our biggest fears, Chris, is by looking at families, it is evident that a large number have developed compassion fatigue. We can look at you as professionals and say to you, it is now the stage to move your loved one, and you will argue with us that your loved one is still healthy, and they're not healthy. They have a terminal brain disease that is slowly destroying the body. And what we want to do is make sure that they're taken care of, but we want to make sure that you, the caregiver, are the survivor. And one of the ways is giving you the tools to use to help you understand you're not imagining anything. Everything you're witnessing in your loved one is directly related back to the area of the brain that has damaged. And if we don't get you to the doctor, if we don't make sure that you're cared for, then your children end up burying both parents close together. You end up not being the grandparent for grandchildren and great grandchildren. And I fully believe, and I saw this today, Chris, with a family member, that if her mother had any idea what this daughter was putting her through, trying to do her mother's care when she's not a professional, she doesn't have 18 people helping her, she doesn't have a full-time activity director, she doesn't have all of the care that we have in communities, that by doing that herself, she was not only endangering her mother's health, but she was also endangering her own. And would her mother be happy about that? And she began to cry and said, no, she would not. She would be very upset. So one of the things you have to be honest with yourself about is, would your loved one be happy to know that you're literally killing yourself trying to do care for them when they have a terminal disease, and when everything we know about the disease says your loved one will get better care in memory care? Because people at Anthem are licensed, they're trained. There's a nurse right there. If someone falls, they bring mobile x-ray there. All the care comes there. All the physicians come there. Everything is done there. And your loved one has to no longer go out and do those things. And that means you get to go back to being a wife, a husband, a daughter, a son, a friend. You get to go back to being you. That makes sense, Chris?
It does.
All right. Now, in dementia, we've talked about this before. There are all kinds of behaviors. And you see dementia behaviors. Common things are, is it hallucination or is it a vision perception issue? Some hallucinations are actually signs of types of dementia. Scatological behaviors, behaviors involving urine or feces, they're human beings with brain damage. And some of them weigh 180 pounds. So when they have a urine episode or a bowel episode, it can be much more than a child's. But it's part of the disease of dementia. We're not upset about it. We're not embarrassed about it. Those are normal human things that happen, is that we need to empty our bladder and we need to empty our bowel. And in dementia, because of brain damage, those things begin to change, but we're not upset about it. We're here to provide care. Delusions or beliefs that are not real. Remember that Lewy body persons have those delusions that you're stealing from me in stage 3 of the disease. The other dementias have that behavior more as a stage 5 behavior. You see a lack of empathy or speech in your loved one. That's due to damage in the frontal lobe. Verbally or physically aggressive, that could be pain. But of the dementias, vascular dementia tends to cause people to be more verbally and physically aggressive. And so for that reason, we've got to make sure we're following the protocol for checking them for depression. We have sexual behaviors that occur. It can be because the person doesn't realize where they are, because the person doesn't know who they are anymore, because old ain't dead is one of the things, because people are sexual creatures as just a part of our nature. We have falls that happen because the brain is damaged, not because your loved one isn't trying to walk correctly or is trying to get attention. Falls happen. Urinary tract infections happen because of brain damage. Delirium and that type of very serious sudden onset of changes in mental status happen because of brain damage. And then Challenges happen with the activities of daily living. Now, remember, we've talked at length about the different activities of daily living, and we have Dr. Katz's scale, which is from the 1950s, built for chronically ill elderly, or we have the Bristol scale built in the 90s for people with dementia. And we, of course, want you to use the Bristol scale because that's going to most closely match what's happening with your loved one. And that's going to give your physician a whole lot more information than you trying to explain what's going on. It's already written down. You just check your loved one's numbers. For pain, anxiety, and depression, we have to pay a lot of attention. 50% of the behaviors in people with dementia are untreated chronic pain issues, the pain that has come from a lifetime of living. But those very same behaviors can also be caused by acute anxiety. Those very same behaviors can also be caused by depression. And so because of that, we have tools to help you observe and understand what is going on with your loved one. Now, 50% of the behaviors in a person with dementia are untreated chronic pain. So when I am called and asked about a person's behavior and what they're doing, and one of the most common things a person with untreated pain does is they punch or hit another person, and that's known as resident on resident abuse, and the community has to make a report to the state, and we have to make measures to make sure that everybody is safe. But when I'm called for that, the first thing I do is get my pain ad scale, because I already know that 50% of behaviors are untreated chronic pain. And every decade of life, if you think you're in your 50s, you're actually in your sixth decade of life. If you're in your 60s, you're in your seventh decade of life. If you're in your 70s, your eighth decade of life. Your 80s, your ninth decade of life. People in their 90s are in their 10th decade of life. Every decade gives us another level of pain. So because of my job as a gerontologist, I know 50% of the pain of the behaviors in a person with dementia are untreated pain. So the very first thing I check on any person with dementia is I do a pain assessment on them, because I already know that's the most likely causation of the behavior that I'm seeing. The second causation is that the staff approached incorrectly. And the third causation is that it is related directly to its dementia, or its untreated anxiety, or untreated depression. So I'm going to use the tools that I have in gerontology in order to properly assess and treat this person. So the first tool is the pain ad tool. All of the tools that we talk about in gerontology for dementia are observational tools. And what an observational tool means, Chris, is I don't have to ask the person a question. I mean, it doesn't make much sense to ask a person with brain damage to give us a real answer because they have brain damage. We don't expect people whose brains are impaired by alcohol, people who are drunk, to give us straight answers because their brain's impaired by alcohol. We don't expect teenagers to ever acknowledge that we won that argument because their brain is flooded with chemicals. It's only halfway through development. You've never won an argument with a teenager. But with a person with dementia, I know I'm dealing with certain things. And if I will begin to take my tool set out, those tools allow me to watch and observe the person, and without ever asking them a question, be able to determine, am I witnessing pain, anxiety, depression, all of the above? Am I actually witnessing psychotic behavior, which means the need for an antipsychotic drug? So the first thing I do on any person that's reported to me for pain is I do a pain assessment on them. And those of you who are parents will quickly recognize that these are the same things you checked on your baby when you brought your baby home from the hospital. And they didn't even give you a book about this, but you quickly learn to listen to their breathing and vocalization, to whether they had negative vocalization. Was it a happy cry or an unhappy cry? What was their facial expression? What was their body language? And were they able to be consoled? And what you realize is that's the very same thing we do to people with brain damage. It's just that we put numbers to it. And even a number of 1 means a person is suffering pain. And I don't want people suffering pain at all. So you not only use your pain ad tonight, the next time you see your loved one. But every quarter, when the doctor sees your loved one again and looks at their medicine, you have to be there with your pain assessment scale to make sure that doctor doesn't take away their pain medicine. I was in a building in Corpus Christi, Texas, and the doctor walked in and asked a 96-year-old lady in memory care, which means she had a dementia diagnosis, if she had pain. Well, every generation is taught to not admit they have pain, and people in their 10th decade of life, I mean, there's a reason why they say old life ain't for wimps. It's tough to be in that age group. She told him when he asked, "Do you have pain?" She said no. But she was on Celebrex, which is a prescription medicine for arthritis. And instead of thinking about this lady has arthritis and she's 96 and she's probably got pretty severe arthritis and I should leave her medicine alone, that doctor asked her if she had pain. And when she said no, he discontinued the Celebrex. And by that night, she was actually physically attacking people. When you and I have pain, we have behaviors that occur as the result of that. Does that make sense, Chris?
It does.
And so every 3 months, when we redo meds with the doctor, when you have a care plan meeting, I need to be there with my loved one's pain ad filled out and ready to say she needs continuous and constant pain medication. Your loved one can have up to 3,000 milligrams a day of ibuprofen, Aleve, or Tylenol. The biggest pushback may actually be from the doctor, Chris, who says, "Oh, that medicine that could hurt their kidneys." They have a terminal brain disease. Let's take care of pain. And people with dementia can have narcotic pain medication if their pain is high enough. And the doctor might say, "Oh, well, that could make them fall." They already fall. They fall because of the disease of dementia itself. They're not falling on purpose. But if we can protect someone from pain, let's do that. Human beings' greatest fear of dying, Chris, is not actually dying, it's dying with pain. And we're a first world country. We're the United States. We can control people's pain. But having your tool there can help you feel more powerful to the doctor and can help you get the doctor to slow down and look more closely at your loved one, because this is actual medical paperwork. These are the tools that we use in gerontology, and the first one is the pain ad. Now, Chris, I love this picture, and I love this picture because there are 3 stages of dementia in it. And one of the biggest things that I hear from families is my person doesn't look like those people in memory care. And all it means is you don't see it. I see it. Chris sees it. Nicole sees it. We all see it because this is our business. We know what it looks like. You don't see it because you don't realize the change that's going to occur. The lady in black with the white hair, who's very animated, she is a stage 5 person. She's actually locked on and talking to an activity director. They're talking about being at the beach. There's a starfish there and some seaweed. And one of the things you may not notice about her is her fingers are very twisted, indicating rheumatoid arthritis. So we know right away before we do anything else, we've got a person with pain issues. But when you look at her, she's very animated. There's a lot of emotion on her face. She's a stage 5 person, but she belongs in memory care because even now in this picture, that lady had already lost a half a pound of her brain tissue. She actually has the mental equivalency of a 12-year-old to an 8-year-old, and by the end of stage 5, an 8-year-old to a 4-year-old. And where this throws people, Chris, is they think, well, if she were really sick, she'd look sick. And in any other disease, she does, except for dementia. In dementia, people don't look sick until the lady in the blue sweater. The lady in the blue sweater has a blank look on her face. There's not much emotion on her face. There's almost a hostile look coming out of her eyes. She's very withdrawn into herself. This is a stage 6 person. And the last lady that's leaning into the picture is a stage 7 person who was gotten out of bed and moved from a wheelchair into a chair so that we could get this picture. So when you tell us as professionals this person doesn't look sick to you, it's because it's your loved one. And you need to try to hear what we're saying. I did a conference today, Chris, and to at least 7 people afterwards, I said, if this were brain cancer, you would be hearing this differently. When a person is in stage 5 of the disease, they meet the criteria to be in memory care because they now have the mental equivalency of a 12-year-old to an 8-year-old. And you and I would never leave a child of that age at home alone to take care of themselves, to feed, to cook, to clean, to take care of animals, to do their medicine, to drive, to do shopping, to maintain the finances. We would never think about doing that. And it's because families don't realize my mom may not look sick yet, but my mom is very sick. It's not until stage 6 and you see the vacancy and you see the hostility and you begin to see the weight loss that you realize it's a very, very real disease. So in your dementia behavioral assessment tool, we start with stage 1 and go through stage 7. There are 7 stages that have been determined for dementia. But stage 1 is you and me, we're aging normally. Stage 2 is called mild cognitive impairment. Stage 3 is called beginning of dementia, and we would expect to know which dementia it is. Stage 4 is when the person with dementia begins to be interesting. Chris, this is when the adult children notice that something's wrong, and being a good adult child, you tried to point out to mama what she did wrong and you got your head snapped off. So you might have just stopped asking mama what was going on, or just begin to notice that things were not the same. She gets easily agitated if she's pressed to answer a question, or she will shut down and refuse to answer a question. And if I press her, then she makes very agitated gestures, noises, and movements towards me. She's not happy. She's still got great social skills, but at the same time, Chris can make these bizarre, elaborate plans to kill herself. One of the ones that I know is the gentleman was going to fly to Norway, join the Hemlock Society, and kill himself. And the first thing I said was, why do you need a round trip ticket? And that confused him, because he had this elaborate plan all laid out, except the plan didn't make any sense. And as I tried to explain it to him, he got more and more frustrated that no, this is what he was going to do. Now, understand, people with dementia say things like, I'm losing my mind, I want to kill myself. And for the most part, that is a thought that comes in a flash, and then it's gone in a flash and it's not remembered. But if this man had said, I'm going to kill myself, and there was a shotgun sitting right there, then we would need to take action. Otherwise, the plan is too elaborate and doesn't make enough sense. And it's normal in stage 5 for people to say to their children, I just want to die. And it scares you to death as a child, but it's just a normal part of the disease process. People in stage 4 still have so much functioning brain. They have great social skills. And because of great social skills, because they don't look sick, they fool medical professionals, they fool neighbors, they fool families, they fool people at church or synagogue. Not because they're intentionally trying to be sneaky and fool you, Chris, but because the rest of us think if he or she was really sick, they would look sick. And what people don't understand is people with dementia don't look sick until the very end of the disease. In stage 4, this is known as moderate dementia. There's decreased knowledge of current events. When we take this person to the doctor, they're now beginning to look to the spouse or to their children to give them the answers. And I get it, how much that hurts you as a family member, because sometimes I have to tell you to stop talking so that I can get a better idea of how declined your loved one is. They begin to ask questions over and over again about, when is the doctor's appointment? When is this next thing we're going to do? And yet if you point it out to them, they will deny that there is a deficit there and actually get very agitated with you. There's a slight hesitation in family member names, but they still seem to get it right most of the time. They begin to get lost doing tasks. If the person still has a job, they're now about to be fired. They're fixing to be fired because they're no longer able to do the work they used to do. They begin to keep lists of their addresses written over and over and over again, or the names of their family written over and over and over again. And all of that is done as a self-guided trying not to lose it technique is what they seem to be doing. Some of them begin to shadow their caregivers, meaning you can't even go to the bathroom, Chris, without the person being there, and we all need a moment of privacy. And very slowly, there begins to be an increased sweet tooth as the brain begins to only be able to taste sweet things. Now, stage 5 means that the person should be in memory care. This is now when we know memory care will be of the most benefit, when we are able to do as much social and physical activity with the person as possible. And while we can't stop the disease, we know that the more social the person is, the easier the disease is. And the problem for the families is you're not you're not an activity director. You're trying to do the work in stage 5 of 12 separate professionals who each have a distinct skill that are used in the care of your loved one. Now, they still don't look sick, but if I have a conversation with this person, Chris, it could be 45 minutes of talking to them before the whole thing begins to repeat itself. And as we get to the end of stage 5, that's only a few seconds before it all begins to repeat itself. They get lost outside of the normal home routine, and there seems to be sort of an internal brainstem function, Chris, that says, I need to refuse to leave this house, because if I leave this house, it will be evident to everybody that something is seriously wrong with me. Because on some level, there is an awareness. It's just not constant the way you would think it would be. And so in stage 5, a person is ready for memory care. And one of the biggest challenges facing a family is making that shift from this is my mother to this is a medical decision about my mother, and my mother doesn't get to be part of the medical decision. We don't ask 5-year-olds if it will be okay with them if we get them up for the next 12 years of their life really, really early and send them to school. You cannot win an argument with a drunk person. Their brain is impaired by alcohol. And you cannot calm, soothe, or make a logical argument with a person in stage 5 of dementia because their brain is heavily damaged. You are making the decision to move them based on the medical need of your loved one. And all of the research shows us your loved one gets better care in Anthem because the folks at Anthem have a nurse there. So if there's a fall, there's somebody right there. The doctors all come there. The staff is trained to recognize urinary tract infections and delirium, and they practice and are set up to get someone picked up by an ambulance and taken away to an ER as quickly as possible. You simply aren't trained to do that. It's not that you're a bad spouse, it's that we don't have 15 of you with specialties so that you understand the disease process, and that's what we do in doing the care for your loved one. Stage 5, most dementias, this is where they accuse their caregiver of stealing from them. And for families who don't live nearby, they may actually think a caregiver is stealing from them. And we do, as professionals, know that this has happened. So we listen with one good ear and pay close attention, but primarily accusing the family member of stealing my money, my bank account, my house, my car, my wallet, my purse, is because you've now had to move them into care and they don't have the brain capacity to understand why. You can literally talk till you're blue in the face, but you're dealing with somebody with brain damage, and all you're going to do is scare them. We do not tell people we're moving to memory care. Most of the time they're going to rehab, and we're going to have a wonderful room ready for them. But for each person, you're going to work individually with your marketing team to determine the best way to get your loved one into care. And at this point, we know your loved one's going to get care. We now begin to turn our focus back to you, the caregiver, to make sure that you survive the disease. The real reason we ask you when you move your loved one in not to come back for several days is nothing sneaky. We just know that by the time you are ready to move them into care, you really need to go home and rest. You need to take some time off. You need to turn your phone off. You need to relax. You need to try to get your own health back. And you need to make an appointment and go see your doctor. Stage 5 is called moderately severe dementia. And one of the things that I think can get you hung up as a family member is you think, as a lady said to me today, my mom has this amount of money. And I said, well, your mother's never going to outlive that amount of money. Stage 5 lasts from 1 to 3 years, and for most people it's 1.5. Stage 6 lasts 1 to 3 years. For most people it's 1. Stage 7 lasts if they make it to stage 7, and most people die in stage 5 or stage 6. Stage 7 lasts less than a year. So when you do your finances, you're not looking at keeping somebody alive for the next 10 years. You're looking at your loved one is in their final few years of life. And that drastically changes how you're able to use your finances to give them the best care possible, but to still keep you alive. In stage 5, they're disoriented to time, date, and place, but they still know their family. They may be hunting or gathering. And this is something you should understand. A community who says they do dementia care, but is upset because your mother is hunting and gathering, is not a community you should be looking at. This is a normal part of the disease of dementia, and it's something that we anticipate and expect to happen. Urinary tract incontinence begins, falling is part of the diseases, sleep disturbances begin to happen, and what that means is they may wake up, eat breakfast, and take a 10-hour nap. They may nap for 20 hours. By the time they get to stage 6, the opposite's going to happen, and they're going to be awake for 36 to 72 hours. The person may be beginning to curse at this stage, indicating the left temporal lobe has died, and now the brain is relying on the right temporal lobe. They chuckle politely when they're lost in conversation, and because of that chuckle and because they probably were a funny person, that can fool others. And the fact that they still don't look sick. But what astonishes me, Chris, is by the end of this stage, they've gone from the equivalency of a 12-year-old to a 4-year-old. And a 4-year-old is not safe. Stage 6 is called severe dementia, and this person now looks ill. They're losing languages and words. They're stooped over. They're shuffling. They're not able to put enough words together to make a sentence that makes sense. They are now singing and cursing routinely. Coordination and movement is affected. We're now beginning to see more falls. This is where we anticipate a broken hip. Remember, they're 6 times more likely to break bones than normal aging elderly. They're colder than normal, and it's getting harder for us to do activities of daily living with them because toileting, bathing, grooming, dressing are all intimate care that we have to do with people. In all our lives, women have been taught not to let people touch us there. Men have been taught not to let people touch them there. And now we have to do care there. So that can cause some challenges for you. In stage 6, there's now the weight loss is beginning. They're having trouble following a 2-stage command. Vision is greatly impaired. Hearing is greatly impaired. Language and speech, movement, and even an outsider would notice that this person is physically and mentally ill at this point. And remember, most people are going to die in stage 5 or stage 6. And if you're watching tonight, it's normal for you to think, I wish this could just be over with. I wish they could go to sleep. That's normal. Nobody wants to see their loved one live to stage 7. Stage 7 is called very severe dementia. And at this point, the person is now bedbound. They are totally reliant upon others for care. They have difficulty chewing, eating, and swallowing food, indicating the disease has reached the brainstem. Their language is usually lost. It's sounds or grunts or very juvenile infant type of sound making that can occur. They're incontinent of bladder and bowel, and even though they're bedbound and need us to move their bodies, their urinary tract infection risk goes up and their fall risk goes up. They're actually one of our highest fallers, or people that require us to move. They're not able to feed themselves. They can't sit up independently. The chin drops down here. They require total care to do the basics of care. The majority of the day they're asleep or they're only semi-alert. There is extreme weight loss here. They're very challenged to swallow. And 2 weeks before the end of life is the final smile, just like 2 weeks after the beginning of life was the first smile. They're an extreme risk for skin breakdown. What would normally take somebody 3 days to have a wound open can now happen only in a matter of hours. And that's just because of how damaged this person's body is. So that's your dementia behavioral assessment tool. And if you're watching this, your person's probably already in stage 5, and we just know that because stage 5 is when you begin to look for outside help. So start in stage 4, just to be double sure. Check off everything you see and realize I grade harder than you do. Chris grades harder than you do. Nicole grades harder than you do because we're professionals We don't have the emotional attachment. We're looking at clinical features. So when you finish grading, go back and look again, because we're usually going to be a half a stage to an entire stage in front of you. Now, if your person has frontal temporal dementia, we have a separate tool for measuring this dementia, and you'll find this in your book or on the website, and it looks more like this. It's a different presentation of the stages. What you do is you find out which dementia your loved one has, and then you follow down that column, and once you begin to reach X's, it means that this behavior, a sudden increase in drinking, is associated with behavioral variant FTD. You follow this all the way through on the type of FTD your loved one has. And when you reach stage 6, there are no more X's, because in stage 6, all dementias are considered the same because there is so much brain tissue loss. The normal amount of tissue loss in stage 6 is about a pound of brain tissue. So at that point, all dementias are considered pretty much the same. The FTD website is theaftd.org. In your itty bitty dementia book, in chapter 4 is the outline of the FTDs, but go to their website. Most of the time when I meet a family who know what FTD is and which one their loved one has, it's because they went to the FTD website and figured it out on their own. So you go there, you click on what is FTD, you read the FTD's clinical features, and very quickly families are able to pinpoint it's this one. Remember, when you look at the FTDs, some of the movement disorder FTDs also are seen in Parkinson's disease dementia, and some of them are referred to as secondary dementias because they only occur if another dementia is already occurring. So cortical basal ganglionic dementia only occurs if another dementia is already present. So just one of the bad things about the FTD group. Now, other observational tools that you're going to use for dementia. The Cornell scale for depression in dementia. And again, all observational tools, because I can't ask somebody, do you feel depressed? Number one, this is a generation of people that didn't believe in depression. Depression is just lazy people who need to get up and work harder. And now we know it's an imbalance of serotonin in the brain. And so what the Cornell scale for depression does is it's an observational tool, which means you simply know your loved one well enough that by looking at the questions, you're able to score how they are. And one of the biggest things I'll hear, Chris, is, oh, I don't need to do that. My person's already on an antidepressant. Yeah, except no one has checked to see if it's the right antidepressant or the right dosage. So if my person's on an antidepressant, I'm going to use my Cornell scale so that I can look at that person and determine, excuse me, whether or not the antidepressant is working. And so I'm going to grade them from its here, and I can't evaluate it because it isn't seen, to where it's actually severe and it's occurring every day. If your person's on an antidepressant and they score on the Cornell scale for dementia, for depression and dementia, then the doctor needs to look at their antidepressant and either tweak it a little bit, add a little bit more to it, take a little bit away from it, or try a different antidepressant altogether. The pain ad we talked about earlier, you're going to look at your person and see how they're breathing, how they're vocalizing, how their body language is. Can they be consoled? The Hamilton Anxiety Scale is called the HAM-A. And the HAM-A, we've got it in your book for two reasons, and there's two reasons I want you to use it. Number one, I want you to check your loved one. Okay? Number two, I want you to check yourself. And so when you look at your Hamilton Anxiety Scale, it says that you have a fear of the dark, of strangers, of being alone, of animals, of traffic, of crowds. If you have any of those, then you need to sign off on it. You may have feelings of tension, feelings of fatigue. You may have worries or anticipation of the worst, irritability. You may have ringing in your ears that wasn't there before. You may have a depressed mood. You may have trouble with concentrating or poor memory. And of course, Chris, you and I both know the minute that somebody who works in dementia or is a family caregiver has trouble with concentration or memory, their first thought is not I have anxiety. Their first thought is, oh crap, I've got it too. And we want you to check not only your loved one for anxiety by observing them, but also take your doctor a copy of your own score. Remember that most family caregivers need to be on anxiety and antidepressant medication for 6 months to 2 years during the course of this final part of the disease with their loved one. And for those of you who are thinking, I don't want to take medicine, we now know that there is a direct connection between untreated depression and Alzheimer's. And so let's make sure we get you on the right medicines to take care of you. The Bristol ADL-IADL scale, we've gone through that, but this scale, remember, was built for people with dementia. It's not like Dr. Katz's scale or the Lawton-Brody scale. This one is specifically for people with dementia so that you can, number one, show the doctor, no matter how dressed up you got your loved one, this is what they're really capable of home, and it's in paper, and I don't have to explain it, and I don't have to argue with my loved one in front of the doctor and embarrass them that no, you really don't bathe. Instead, I've got it all on the Bristol scale. It also means that I can check my scale in the next quarter to see where my loved one is now so that I can see the decline and not feel like I'm so caught off guard, but I'm actually staying on top of it. The brief psychiatric rating scale, this is the scale physicians use to give your loved one an antipsychotic. And Chris, one of the most common things I hear is when professionals see the brief psychiatric rating scale, they go, we need to medicate my boss. It's not actually for your boss. Although they may meet some of the criteria at times, we all know bosses who've lost it, but it's to help you help your physician get your loved one on the right medication, reduce the medication, increase the medication, but also let you realize that you're seeing behaviors that are not normal for your loved one that we can treat. Now, there's two ways to think about antipsychotic medication. One is somebody who didn't really understand the research wrote down their black box drugs, and they can cause death, but so can aspirin. So your thought is, we want you to be able to ask your doctor and understand antipsychotics well enough to know that without using them, your loved one may be like this for the rest of their life. But if we use the right medicine, we can get your loved one more like this for the rest of their life. And that's more of the person you knew. So use your brief psychiatric rating scale. Is that making sense, Chris?
It is. Thank you.
Chris says yes. Okay. Now, we also have tools to measure your stress levels. And I can tell you, Chris, one of the biggest gasps that I get from families is when I look at the family caregiver who is struggling so, and who doesn't understand that we just can't put someone in dementia care because we want to. They have to have fallen to this criteria indicating this amount of brain damage. But the other thing is to help the family understand how this is affecting them as well. It helps you realize that you're not crazy, you're actually watching a brain disease. And so the tools that I want you to fill out for yourself to take to the doctor are Zaret's Burden Interview. Zaret's Burden Interview is a measurement of your stress level. It's not a measurement of you as a good person or a bad person. It's a measurement of your stress level. And any score above 40, Chris, you better be talking to your doctor, because any score above 40 means your own health is now in peril. The Caregiver Grief Inventory. When you and I meet family caregivers, they're already grieving at what is called post-death grief. They are grieving for their loved one as though they had already died, even though their loved one is still alive. And the most common thing you and I hear is, I wish they could just go to sleep tonight. And families are embarrassed to say that, but that's a human thought. You're watching a person who looks like your mother who's no longer your mother. Somebody who looks like your husband who's no longer your husband. Somebody who looks like, but is slowly becoming a shell of who they were. And you have to ask yourself, would they be happy that I'm killing myself trying to take care of them while they have a terminal brain disease? And so I want you to do the Caregiver Grief Inventory. and make sure that all of these papers go to your physician. The Hamilton Anxiety Tool, you did it as an observational tool for your loved one. Now you're going to do it for yourself. And if you need help, ask a sibling to help you or a good friend. They will be happy to give you an observation of how they feel you're doing, because trust me, people that love you are worried about you. I want you to do the geriatric depression scale. Now, this is different than the Cornell scale for depression and dementia. This one is yes or no, and how you felt in the last week. There is no hemming and hawing and well, maybe a little bit. It's yes or no of how you felt in the last week. It's not a judgment of you as a person. It's grabbing a measurement of whether or not you need an antidepressant. If you score 5 or more of the bolded answers on the geriatric depression scale, that's a positive test for depression. It means you need to take that paper to your doctor as well. And I'm amazed, Chris, this last week, I think I've talked to 12 different family members. Every one of them said, my doctor wanted me to go on antidepressants. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. Until you tell them it causes Alzheimer's, and now I'm happy to go on my antidepressants. So we want to protect you. Let the doctor do that. I want you to do the self-compassion.org test. And when you do that, I don't have, oh, here it is. Here's a phone. When you do that and you're typing it on your phone, turn your phone sideways, because when the test comes up, it will allow you to have an easier time taking the test. Now, I'm an overachiever. The top score on that test is 5. I was pretty sure, Chris, I would get like a 5.3, probably a 6. I would score way up above the line. My original score on the self-compassion test was 1.32. Now, the wonderful thing is, Kristen Neff's website tells you here's areas where you're not thinking about taking care of yourselves and where you can make some change. And the last time I took the self-compassion test, my score had come up quite a bit. But even given what I do, and I'm not doing direct care for a person with dementia, COVID affected me, the pandemic affected me, life affected me, and I stopped doing things for myself that I should have been doing. So go to Dr. Neff's website and do selfcompassion.org. Use your Bristol scale. It is going to be one of the most powerful tools you can take to your physician, because it's going to help the doctor understand what it is you're actually going through, because it lists all of the ADLs and the IADLs, and it's built for dementia, whereas the other ones have not been built. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. One of the other ones I want you to do is called the short IQ code. The short IQ code, I really like this because every single question starts with compared to 10 years ago today. And there's 2 reasons that I want you to use this test. Number 1 is I want you, the family caregiver, to realize you really have been doing care for at least 10 years. You have done your due diligence. The average cancer family is a caregiver only 2 years, and you've been doing care for at least a decade. And the short IQ code helps you realize that, but it also is another tool to show your physician of what is happening with your loved one. It's also another tool that says you're not crazy. One of the things I see with families, Chris, is they will tell me, I think I'm imagining it, or they will tell me this started 3 months ago. And unless it was a massive stroke, it didn't start 3 months ago. It's been in place for a while. It's just that dementias are slow and subtle. And so very, very slowly, you discovered what was going on with your loved one. Your grief inventory you're going to do, your geriatric depression scale you're going to do, and then the last one, pay attention to the brief psychiatric rating scale. Now, Chris, I know you and I have laughed about this before. The most common thing when people see the brief psychiatric rating scale is they go, my boss is psychotic. My loved one is psychotic. I always knew something was wrong with my cousin. So don't fall into that trap. Instead, look at the tool, try to be as objective as possible, and realize that this is the tool you use to discuss with your doctor putting your loved one on an antipsychotic medication to keep them from being this and to get them as close to themselves as possible as we do care for them to the end of life. And remember, always, always our goal is your loved one is going to be cared for, but we also want to make sure that you are the survivor of the disease. And Anthem Memory Care is going to do everything they can to help you, from support groups to activities to staff that understand the stress you're under and what you're going through. Most of the people in our business have a personal connection to dementia. They understand your journey. They understand the stress you're under and the fears you're under. And we want to make you aware of the tools that I, as a gerontologist, use and you've never heard of because that's not your field. So we want you to be aware of all the tools I use so that you can use them yourself to help your loved one get the best care possible for the remainder of their life. And know that Anthem is aware of these tools and knows how to use them, and they're going to help you when you can't quite decide what stage your loved one's in. We're going to give you honest answers about where they are. Does that make sense?
It does.
All right, Chris, I'm ready for questions. We're running so on time today. Nicole will be proud of us.
Okay, so if you can type your questions into the chat. I've been trying to keep up in the chat with all of the assessment tools. So in case you don't have the itty bitty book, all the assessment tools are in the chat that we talked about. But please feel free to put any questions in there. Okay, so the first one is dementia considered a disease, illness, or condition?
It's a disease. It is a terminal progressive disease.
Excellent, thank you.
That was depressing. Is there a better question? That was a tough question. Good question, though.
Give people time to type.
Or maybe everyone wants to go home. You know, you never know. You never know. We had a hurricane go across Texas, so anything crazy could happen.
Right. Well, we're glad that you were safe.
I was nowhere near it. We didn't even get any rain. But my friends in Houston all lost power, but it was back on that night. So, yay.
So, Dr. Tam, I have a question for you.
Yes,
if you're a family member and you're going to the doctor for either, let's talk about for yourself first. When you went through a lot of different assessment tools that could possibly be overwhelming for families, which one would be the most important, or which couple would be the most important for them to complete to make sure they're bringing to the doctor?
the group that are listed right here, Zaretz, which is a measure of your stress level, the geriatric depression scale, which is a measure of you for depression, the Hamilton Anxiety Scale, which is a measure of you for anxiety. And as a general rule of thumb, Nicole, depression is thought of as coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm living in the past. And anxiety is thought of as what if, what if, what if? What if this terrible thing happens to my loved one? So all of these scales should be filled out and taken to the doctor at the same time. These are the things that the doctor just may not be looking at because they haven't lived as a caregiver. When doctors see someone with dementia, that doesn't mean they go home to someone with dementia and they take care of them. They may only see somebody with dementia occasionally for 5 minutes. You're dealing with it nonstop, and you're dealing with a huge amount of learned guilt. You're feeling guilty for something you've actually not done anything to feel guilty for. So these simple tools right here will help the doctor realize what your stress level is and build a plan of care for you so that you're the survivor.
Excellent, thank you. On the brief psychiatric rating scale, it goes from 0 points to 7 points, or I guess 7. How would a family know what very mild, moderate, moderately severe, and extremely severe?
Extremely severe is we're seeing it all the time. I mean, it's happening every day. It's a constant thing that's going on with your loved one. Moderate is we're seeing it a few times a week. Very mild is I've seen it like once that I've seen this behavior. Usually when we're using this scale, Like you think about hostility. I can think about residents I've seen who are very, very hostile, but that's not their normal personality, but that is a sign of a psychotic feature. So extremely severe would mean I'm seeing it every day constantly. Severe would mean I'm seeing it, I've seen it a couple of times today, but it's not constant. Moderately severe is a few times a week. Moderate, a little bit less than that. Mild and very mild go down to I'm just not seeing it. And you can see as you read through here, there can be things on here that I may not be cooperating, and that doesn't make me psychotic. But first, somebody needs to check my vision, my pain, my anxiety, and see how I'm doing. So it may not be actually a psychotic feature. It may be something that can be treated through pain or depression or anxiety. So I've got to look at my scales all together, and I've got to do my detective work to see. But extremely severe means constant. Mild or very mild mean I'm not really seeing this very often. And you can write that down for the doctor on your scale. Any questions that you have about how often you're seeing it.
Okay, great. So we do have a couple of questions now. The first one is, how do I get the family to understand dementia? They don't understand what I'm going through. They just read well. They can, oh, wait, it just moved. They can read well. They can live for 10 years, and it's hard for me to explain everything to them.
Well, they probably aren't going to live for 10 years. And this is where your Bristol tool comes into play, because it's such a more complete ADL tool. But the other thing, Nicole, is we run into, and I know with your career, you've seen it, Chris, you've seen it, I've seen it. We've run into somebody who was a reader. They always loved books, and they walk around with a book or they walk around with a newspaper, and they can read words in the newspaper or words in the book. And because the family wants to see who they used to see, the family can easily convince themselves that they're actually reading that book. So hold that thought. So they're reading the book, but then there's something called comprehension. And that takes us back to when we were learning reading. First, we learn letters of the alphabet, then we learn those letters made words. Then they begin to make us, in my time, it was see Dick run, see Spot run, see Jane run. And you read those words, but then one day comprehension happened. And you realize that run, Dick, run isn't 3 words. Run, Dick, run means that there's a little boy who's outside running as hard and as fast as he can. So there's a difference between they're still reading words and they're actually comprehending the meaning. Does that make sense?
It does. How would you explain that, though, to someone who might be in denial that their loved one has dementia?
Well, Nicole, for years I was infamous for saying there's no such thing as denial, that family just needs more education. And then I thought maybe I should go research this. And I found out there's actually 5 children. Child number 1 says, mom is sick. We need to find out what it is. We need to build a plan. We need to take care of it. Child number 2 goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. We should do that. Child number 3 says, oh, all old people get dementia. Child number 4 goes, yeah, who cares? And child number 5 says, what are y'all talking about? And so for years, I've thought everybody was a number 1. And if they were a number 5, they just needed more education. And it turns out there are literally some family members that are not going to get it. But you and I know, Nicole, Chris, you and I know family members that are not walking in your shoes and doing the actual care can stop you from moving forward in the care of your loved one and making the medical decision that you have to make. You're not making a decision to put someone in Anthem because you don't like them anymore and you don't want to see them. This is a decision made for their medical need. And what is, I think, particularly frustrating for Nicole, for Chris, for me, it is for me anyway, is that if it were brain cancer and we said to you, it is time to move your loved one into care, you would say, oh, it's brain cancer, it's time to move them. And that's because you've been taught to trust us as medical professionals about cancer. but you haven't been taught to trust us about dementia, and no one explained to you that even with dementia, even though they're very sick, they may still look fine to you. To us, they don't. And so the tools are there to help you make your measurements. The tools are there to help you follow them through the disease, to help you realize how quickly the disease is progressing or how slowly the disease is progressing. But it's to help you do better at what you do. It's to help you be the survivor. It's to help us do better care for your loved one. I don't even know if I answered the question at that point, but I think I sounded good.
No, I think that was good. And I'm going to put in the chat our YouTube channel where all of the last 9 webinars from Dr. Tam are all on there, which might help if it is an education issue that your family member watching those videos, it might help as well.
And some of them aren't going to watch them, Nicole. I mean,
Yep.
Some of them just don't get it. And I would beat my head against the wall. They just need to be trained. They just need to be trained. You may not be able to get everyone to be on your side. But one of the things that I think is most frightening to that primary caregiver who says something's wrong, we got to make a plan, we got to figure out what we're going to do. If you drop dead tomorrow, who steps up to take your place? And I think that is really scary for a lot of families because of that person that seems to be in denial, that number 5 person of what are y'all talking about? So it's a very real thing. It's why we do support groups. It's why y'all let people come to support groups, even if their loved one's not in your community, because you recognize how important that is to people.
Right. Okay, so we do have one more question. In a first meeting with a new physician, what would be best to share from a caregiver family member perspective?
Nothing unless you want to have a very unpleasant ride home. You want to have your staging tool turned in, your Cornell scale for depression turned in, your Hamilton anxiety scale, your brief psychiatric rating scale, your pain ad turned in. You want to write a brief psychosocial. And what a psychosocial is, you're going to write down where your person was born, their parents' names, where they grew up. Are they a city girl? Are they a country girl? Where they went to school, what was normal for them, and what they were like as a person. So you want to give this doctor sort of a brief synopsis of who your person was. They weren't this old person who has brain damage. They were a vibrant, exciting, live person who had babies, who had grandchildren, who was a spouse, who was great at whatever they did. And you want to present that picture to them, but you also want to give them these tools to help that doctor not be fooled by how your person looks today, that this is actually what's going home. And we want that information there before you get there, because Nicole, the last thing you and I ever want to do is sit in a doctor's office with somebody with dementia and tell the doctor, she doesn't bathe. Because that's not only have I insulted you, I've insulted you in front of a doctor. And so that's not going to be a pleasant ride home. But if I have sent the doctor this information ahead of time, then the doctor is better prepared for what we're coming to see the doctor for and what medications are going to be needed. And you also, we're always trying to look for specialists in our business, and we just don't have very many. So I tell families, if you're in that region, call Anthem, ask them who they recommend, who they use, who oversees their buildings. They'll be able to give you the best information about the physicians in your area. And then the reason for this observational paperwork is because we can't ask people with brain damage to give us true answers, but nobody knows that person better than you, their family does. And so if you fill out this paperwork, the doctor has a full, complete picture of who this person is now and who they used to be. And that's critical for designing their care plan.
Great, thank you. Why does this disease affect so many well-educated people?
The numbers are the same for education as for non-educated. The numbers are the same in first world countries. So there doesn't seem to be a differentiation between that. I think that well-educated people tend to be in a higher socioeconomic group, and so they tend to have better medical care. But then you go back and look at Robin Williams and Bruce Willis and other celebrities that we know, and it's evident they didn't get the best care. So use your tools, get yourself prepared, know that it's a terminal brain disease, know that depression is part of it, and then do everything we can to treat your loved one with the drugs that we do have to keep them as comfortable as possible.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? There's comments in here thanking you for your presentation. They find it very helpful.
Good.
I'll just wait, if you don't mind, another minute just to make sure that there aren't any final questions. And then we will let everybody go and enjoy the rest of their evening. This webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel as well as our website. You'll find it on the Anthem website. All of these tools are, you have them in the chat as well as in the itty bitty book. So if you have not received your itty bitty book, please reach out to the closest Anthem community to you, and we'll make sure that you get one. And then all the tools are in there as well. Or you can go to Dr. Tam's website, and all the tools are on her website as well.
Okay, and when you use your tools, when you get to your scores, draw a line and date it. Because when you come back the next time, you're not going to get out another tool. You're going to use this same tool to see where they are now. And that, Nicole, is one of the things that helps families realize how quickly the disease is moving. Because I know we run into families that think, oh, they're going to live 20 more years, and they're not. The brain runs the body. I don't care how healthy they look right now. They are frail and fragile people. And we're doing the best we can to do the best care possible for them. And the more information you can give us, the better. And the more you can educate yourself and understand the disease, the better partnership we're able to build with you to do the best care possible for your loved one. And that's really, Nicole, you and I know that's all anybody's asking. They're just asking us to take really good care of somebody they love. And that's all we want to do.
Okay, so Carol does have a question. Carol, you should be able to come off mute now, if I did that correctly. She had a question. She asked if she could.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm off of mute, am I?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Well, Dr. Tam, my question is, what if I put in our will that we would care for each other at home for the rest of our life?
Then you made a decision in a will when you had no idea that he would develop a debilitating terminal brain disease that requires 24-hour medical and social care. That's not something you did intentionally, and a will is not binding in that way. My mother has her wishes in her will of what she would like to happen, but they're not technically something that's going to happen. And the will is only in place when a person passes. We've all, Nicole will tell you this, Chris will tell you this, Amanda, everybody that works in our field will tell you this, that every person they know promised someone, I will never put you in care. But when you made that promise, you had no idea in your life, because we didn't know these diseases even existed. You had no idea in your life they would develop a terminal brain disease that requires care. And what Anthem allows you to do is it allows you to go back to being a wife and let them do the heavy lifting, and you come in and share a donut, share a slice of pie, do something you know your sweetie pie loves, and then you're able to leave and go, because we've got to have you start building your life again, or you won't survive the disease, and then your children end up losing twice. We all die, but nobody needs to bury both parents within a few months of each other. And as a grandmother, you're responsible for carrying on your family traditions. That's part of the American culture, is our grandmothers are so very important to our lives. And everybody on this call would tell you they want you to see your grandchildren graduate. They want you to see them get married. They want you to see you become a great grandmother. He has a terminal brain disease, And in order for you to survive, we have to place him in medical care and give you as much support as possible. Now, if you place your loved one in care and they die this week, you didn't make that happen. They didn't die because they went to care. They died because you had done so much care at home that you put your own self at risk. And I dare you to look at your husband as to who he truly was and tell me he would be happy to know that he had a terminal brain disease and you were literally killing yourself when he could go into care and be properly cared for. And that by no means that you're not a good person. It means that all of our research tells us people get better care in memory care because they're licensed, they're trained, a nurse is there, help is there. They know what to do if something happens or if a person appears different. Whereas a fatigued, exhausted caregiver is not licensed, is not trained, doesn't do all of these different jobs, and is just trying to barely get from one day to the next. And that's not fair for him, and it's not fair for you. And I don't believe any man that loved you would want you to go through that. So I would not worry about what was written in a will. I would not worry about a promise I made to someone when I had no idea a disease like this even existed, because we didn't. Nobody did. When I was growing up, you had a hardening of the arteries in some people, and other people had senility. Senility is Alzheimer's, hardening of the artery is vascular dementia. And we're seeing a huge number now because it's the last of the baby boomer population. We're the largest population the world has ever seen. But he would not have wanted you to kill yourself trying to do care for him while he's terminally ill. I believe that people with dementia, by the largest part, would say, keep me comfortable, feed me chocolate, and let me go. And that's what we want you to do, is to be able to reach that point to where you can let him go and you can be the survivor. And now, Nicole, we're also incredibly depressed that we will not be able to continue. So, ma'am, are you okay? Did I lose y'all? Nicole?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Are you okay, ma'am?
It's asking Carol. Okay. Well, it was very emotional, so she might not be able to come off mute.
Okay, and everybody knows my phone number. I know that I give you terrible, terrible information. I know how hard it is. I see your faces when I speak. If you need to reach out to me, any of you, Miss Carol, if you need to reach out to me, my number is 254-216-3668. That is my real phone. It's around here somewhere. This is it. It's the only phone I have. That is my phone, and I answer every call. I return every call. If you need me right away, Miss Carol, and I haven't answered you, I'm not a moron. Call me twice in a row. I'll figure out somebody needs to speak to me right now. Otherwise, if I don't answer the phone, it's because I'm traveling or I'm speaking. But I will get back in touch with you. And I think you asked a very powerful question, because most every family I've ever met has made that promise to someone. But you made it never realizing there was a disease that would do this. And our goal, and I believe your children and your grandchildren's goal, is to keep you around as long as possible. Okay?
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tam. Our next webinar with Tam is going to be on August 14th, and we are talking about effective approaches, communication tips, and the impact on the 5 senses.
Okay, that sounds like fun. I'm excited.
All right. So we will
Okay.
see you, Dr. Tam, in a month. Hopefully we'll
Yes,
see
ma'am.
everybody on the call, and we will make sure that this gets posted in the next couple of days. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all again next month.
You bet. And Miss Carol, you holler if you need me, okay? Or reach out to Nicole or Chris or anybody. We are here to support each other, okay? Thank you, Anthem. Thank you for what you guys continue to do. You're doing a great job of educating people about a very, very complex disease. So thank you for letting me be a part of that. And I will see y'all next week, next month,
Next month. Thank you.
sometime.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.